What if the most dangerous man in the universe wasn't a warlord, a conqueror, or an alien empire, but a single laughing man drifting through space? A man with green hair, a purple suit, and a smile that promised madness. What if, in a galaxy built on order, diplomacy, and the ideals of the Federation, chaos suddenly arrived in the form of a clown? The kind of chaos that didn't want to rule the stars, but simply watch them burn. Because somewhere, in deep space, on a quiet Federation starship, a containment alarm has just started screaming, and inside the cell, a prisoner is laughing. The USS Enterprise glided through the stars with the quiet elegance of a civilization that believed it had finally grown beyond its darkest instincts. For centuries, the United Federation of Planets had expanded across the galaxy with a single dream: exploration without conquest, unity without tyranny. Humanity believed it had evolved, but evolution has a funny way of meeting its opposite. Space itself twisted, folding inward like a sheet of glass cracking across reality. A swirling vortex of violet light erupted directly in the Enterprise's path. "Helm, evasive maneuvers," Picard commanded, but it was already too late. The vortex exploded outward, hurling fragments of something metallic into space. Debris spun across the Enterprise's sensors, burned hull plating, shattered engines, and the skeletal remains of a ship that did not belong to any known civilization. But that wasn't the disturbing part. Among the debris, there was a "Captain," Data said slowly. "Sensors detect a single humanoid life sign within one of the fragments." Picard frowned. "Survivor? Possibly." Commander Riker leaned forward. "From that wreckage, that's impossible." Picard stood. "Transport them aboard." Moments later, the transporter room shimmered. A figure materialized on the platform. Green hair, white skin, a purple suit dusted with ash and stardust. The man stood perfectly still. Then his eyes opened, and he smiled. "Hello," the stranger said softly, glancing around the pristine Starfleet room. "Well, this is new." Picard arrived moments later, observing the stranger carefully. "I am Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the USS Enterprise. You were recovered from the wreckage of a ship that appeared through an unknown spatial anomaly." The man slowly turned to him. His grin widened. "Oh, now, Captain Fancy accent. I'm what you might call an interdimensional tourist." Picard's gaze sharpened. "Your name?" The man gave a theatrical bow. "Joker." Silence filled the transporter room. Data stuttered him with curiosity. "Captain, the subject's psychological indicators are highly irregular." Joker looked at the android. "Oh, you're fun," he said. "Are you a robot?" "'Cause I love robots. They're always so serious." Riker stepped closer. "Captain, we should place him in containment until we know what we're dealing with." Picard nodded. "Agreed." The security officers escorted Joker toward the brig, and the entire time, he hummed happily to himself. But as the doors of the cell closed behind him, Joker slowly approached the transparent barrier and looked out into the pristine corridors of the Enterprise. "So this is the future," he whispered. "Perfect order, perfect rules, perfect heroes." He leaned closer to the glass, his grin stretching wider. "Let's see how long that lasts." Across the ship, systems flickered for half a second. Data noticed it immediately, cupped him. "We are experiencing a minor systems anomaly." Picard frowned. Cosette had hesitated. "I am uncertain." In the brig, Joker leaned back against the wall of his cell and began laughing quietly. Because somewhere between Gotham and the stars, chaos had just found the perfect playground, and the Federation had absolutely no idea what it had just brought aboard. What if the Federation's greatest strength, its belief in reason, order, and diplomacy, was exactly what made it defenseless against someone who didn't believe in any of those things? What if the most dangerous weapon aboard the Enterprise wasn't a disruptor or a photon torpedo, but a man who could turn logic into a joke and morality into a punchline? Because at this very moment, deep inside the Enterprise brig, the Joker is sitting alone in a force-field cell, and he's smiling like he already knows how the story ends. The brig was silent, except for the quiet hum of the containment field. Joker sat cross-legged on the floor of his cell, staring at the ceiling like someone enjoying a pleasant afternoon in the park. Outside the barrier, 2 Starfleet security officers watched him carefully. "It doesn't look dangerous," one whispered. The other didn't respond, because something about the man made the air feel wrong. Not violent, not threatening, just wrong. Joker suddenly tilted his head toward them. "You know," he said casually, In my experience, the quiet ones are always the most suspicious. Both guards stiffened. How long have you been staring at me? Joko continued. 5 minutes. 10. Waiting for me to do something crazy. He leaned forward slightly. Disappointed yet. One of the officers stepped closer to the field. He'll remain silent. Joko blinked. Then he burst out laughing. Oh, you people are adorable. He stood slowly and walked toward the barrier, stopping inches away from the energy field. You have starships, teleporters, energy weapons, replicators, entire planets working together in harmony. He tapped the invisible barrier lightly. And you still think putting someone in a cage makes you safe? The guard frowned. You are safe. Jokum's smile sharpened. Oh, sweetheart, he whispered. You're the ones who should be worried. Meanwhile, on the bridge, Captain Picard was reviewing the sensor logs from the anomaly that had brought Joker into their universe. What do we know about him? Picard asked. Data stood beside the captain's chair, studying a pad. Very little, Captain. His physiology is human, though his biochemical readings are unusual. How so? His nervous system shows abnormal stimulation patterns typically associated with heightened adrenaline and unstable emotional states. Riker crossed his arms. In plain terms, Data paused. He appears to experience amusement in situations where most humans would experience stress or fear. Picard sighed. A man who finds danger entertaining. Worf, standing at tactical, growled softly. I do not trust him. Riker smirked slightly. Worf, you don't trust anyone. That is because most people are not trustworthy. Before the conversation could continue, a quiet alert chimed across the bridge. Dad had turned to his console. Captain, I am detecting a minor security protocol override within Deck 7. Picard looked up. Data scanned again. The command appears to originate from the brig. Everyone on the bridge turned at once. That's impossible, Riker said. He's locked behind a containment field. Picard stood. Mr. Worf, increase security around the prisoner. Aye, Captain. But in the brig, something very strange was happening. Joker leaned against the wall of his cell, watching the guards. One of them had stepped away to check a console. The other remained near the force field. Joker hummed quietly to himself. Then he spoke again. You know what I love about systems? The guard ignored him. Joker grinned wider. They're predictable. The officer at the console frowned. Hey, something's wrong with this panel. The second guard turned. What? Diagnostics are cycling on their own. Joker clapped slowly. See? Predictable. The guards exchanged a glance. What did you do? Joker shrugged. Nothing yet. Suddenly the lights in the brig flickered. The containment field shimmered for half a second. The guards froze. Stabilize that field, one shouted. But the console beeped again. A strange command line scrolled across the screen. The guards stared. I didn't input that. Joker stood up slowly. You know, he said thoughtfully, in Gotham City they tried locking me in cells like this all the time. The containment field flickered again. The guards raised their fizzes. Don't move. Joker stepped closer to the barrier, his face illuminated by the pulsing energy field. I learned something interesting about highly advanced systems. He smiled. They're built by people who assume everyone follows the rules. The console suddenly sparked. The force field collapsed. For exactly 2 seconds. 2 seconds was all Joker needed. He stepped through the space where the barrier had been. The guards reacted instantly, raising their phasers. But Joker moved faster than either of them expected. Not violently, not aggressively, just unpredictably. He knocked one phaser aside, ducked under the other guard's arm, and grabbed the console. By the time the officers regained their footing, the containment field had already snapped back into place. But Joker was no longer inside it. He stood outside the cell now, casually brushing dust from his jacket. The guards stared in disbelief. That's impossible, one whispered. Joker tilted his head. Impossible is such a boring word. Alarms suddenly erupted throughout the brig. On the bridge, red lights flashed. Security breach, Data announced. Picard's voice sharpened. Location. The prisoner has exited containment. Worf slammed a control. Security teams deploying. Picard looked toward the view screen. Status of the prisoner. Data paused. He is walking down the corridor. Walking. Yes. Captain Riker frowned. Where is he going? Data studied the sensors again. Then his expression changed just slightly. Captain, yes, Mr. Data. It appears the individual known as Joker is heading toward the ship's main computer core. Back in the corridor, Joker strolled calmly through the halls of the Enterprise like a tourist exploring a museum. He passed stunned crew members, security teams rushing past, and blinking emergency lights. He stopped at a wall panel and tilted his head. "Computer, the system responded instantly. "State your command." Joker's grin widened. "Oh, this is going to be fun." He tapped the console lightly. "Let's see how perfect your little Federation really is." But far across the galaxy, something else had noticed the sudden disturbance aboard the Enterprise. Something ancient, something cold, something that did not laugh. In deep space, a dark cube-shaped vessel altered its course, because a signal had just appeared in the galactic network. A signal that shouldn't exist. A signal broadcasting pure, chaotic unpredictability. And the Borg had become curious. What if the Joker didn't want to escape the Enterprise? Because the Enterprise itself was the punchline. What if the greatest starship in Starfleet wasn't a prison for him but a stage? Because while security teams are now racing through the corridors, while Captain Picard is preparing to stop a threat he barely understands, the Joker has already reached the one place on the ship where a single whisper can control everything. The computer core. The corridor outside the main computer chamber was sealed with thick reinforced doors. 2 armed Starfleet security teams stood ready, phasers drawn. Worf himself led the response. "No one enters or leaves," he ordered. The doors hissed open. Inside the massive chamber, glowing towers of Federation computing systems hummed quietly, processing billions of calculations every second. It was the brain of the Enterprise. And in the center of the room, Joker sat in the captain's chair of the control console, feet propped up, spinning slowly. He stopped when he saw them. "Oh good," he said cheerfully. The welcoming committee. Every phaser aimed directly at him. "Do not move," Worf growled. Joker raised his hands theatrically. "Relax, big guy. If I wanted to hurt someone, we'd already be playing a very different game." Worf stepped forward. "You have compromised Federation systems?" Joker leaned sideways, tapping the glowing console beside him. "Compromised? That sounds so negative. I prefer exploring," one of the security officers whispered to Worf. "Sir?" "He's accessed the ship's operating interface." Worf's eyes narrowed. "How?" Joker shrugged. "He left the door unlocked." "That is impossible." Joker grinned. "Oh, you people really need to stop saying that word." At that moment, Captain Picard and Commander Riker entered the chamber. Picard stepped forward slowly. "Mr. Joko." Joker straightened immediately. "Captain Fancy Accent. I was wondering when you'd show up." Picard remained calm. "You have violated the security protocols of this vessel." Joker placed a hand dramatically over his heart. "Oh, I'm sorry. Should I have made an appointment?" Riker took a step forward. "Step away from the console." Instead, Joker leaned closer to it. "You know what fascinates me about you Federation types?" No one answered. Joker continued anyway. "You built a perfect little civilization. No money, no war between yourselves. Everyone polite. Everyone cooperative." He gestured around the room. "A galaxy run on trust." He looked directly at Picard. "That's adorable." Picard's voice hardened. "Your attempt to provoke us will not succeed." Joker laughed softly. "Oh, Captain, I'm not provoking you." His fingers tapped the console. "I'm testing you." Suddenly, every light in the chamber dimmed. The walls flickered with holographic projections. Starfleet command centers, Federation worlds, starship fleets. The entire Federation network now flowed across the computer displays. Riker looked stunned. How did he access that? Data's voice came through the communicator. "Captain, the Joker has initiated a ship-wide data cascade. He is routing the Enterprise's communication systems through multiple subspace relays." Picard frowned. "For what purpose?" Inside the computer core, Joker spread his arms wide. "Ladies and gentlemen of the Federation," his voice echoed through the Enterprise. "And anyone else listening across your adorable little galactic internet." Picard stepped forward. "Terminate that broadcast." Joker ignored him. "I'd just arrived in your universe, and already I have to say." He looked directly into a camera drone that had activated above the console. "This place is boring." Across multiple Federation listening stations, the signal suddenly appeared. Unidentified broadcast. Origin, USS Enterprise. Audio feed, activated. Joker waved at the camera. "So I thought we should spice things up." Picard's voice cut through sharply. "End the transmission." But Joker was already smiling wider. "Let me ask you all a question." His voice lowered slightly. What if your perfect federation only works because no one has tried to break it properly? The room tensed. Joker leaned closer to the console. What if I showed you something interesting? Picard realized too late what he meant. Mr. Joker, the console chimed. Across the Enterprise, dozens of automated systems activated simultaneously. Cargo bay doors opened. Shuttle bay shields dropped. Emergency power grids not destructive, just wrong. Pure chaos. Data's voice came through urgently. Captain, he is initiating random command strings across the ship's systems. Riker swore under his breath. What does he gain from that? Joker turned the chair slowly toward them again. Entertainment. He pointed upward. You see, Captain, you people built a system that assumes everyone wants order. He tapped the console again. But what happens when someone doesn't? Suddenly, the bridge alarm sounded again. Worf's communicator crackled. Bridge 2 security teams. Riker answered. Report. The ship's navigation systems have begun executing unpredictable course corrections. Picard turned sharply. Mr. Joker. But Joker leaned forward, whispering excitedly. Oh, wait until you see the next part. Before Picard could stop him, Joker pressed a final command. The main screen behind him changed. Not Federation data. Not ship controls. Something else. A signal. A transmission from deep space. Cold. Mechanical. Unmistakable. Data's voice returned. Quieter this time. Captain Picard looked up. Yes, Mr. Data. Data hesitated. We are receiving a response to the Joker's broadcast. From where? There was a pause. Then Data answered. From a Borg vessel. The room went completely silent. On the screen, the signal stabilized. A dark cube-shaped silhouette appeared among the stars. Joker stared at it with childlike fascination. Well now, he whispered, things just got interesting. Because somewhere out there in the endless dark, the Borg had heard the laughter. And they were coming to investigate. What if the Joker had just done the one thing no civilization in the galaxy had ever dared to do? Attract the attention of the Borg on purpose. What if the most methodical, cold, and unstoppable force in the universe had just heard a signal it couldn't understand? A signal made entirely of chaos. Because right now, on the Enterprise, Captain Picard is staring at a screen showing the unmistakable silhouette of a Borg cube approaching, and the only man smiling about it is the Joker. The computer core had gone completely silent. Every officer stared at the image of the Borg vessel slowly drifting across the display. Even Worf looked uneasy. Captain, Data's voice echoed through the chamber. Long-range sensors confirmed the vessel is altering course toward the Enterprise. Picard's expression hardened. Limited time to intercept. 43 minutes. Riker exhaled sharply. That's not much time. Joker clapped his hands happily. Oh, visitors. Every weapon in the room pointed back at him instantly. Picard stepped closer. You deliberately contacted the Borg. Joker tilted his head. Contacted. No. I just told a joke. That was not a joke. Oh, Captain, Joker said softly. Everything is a joke. Riker stepped forward. Do you have any idea what the Borg are? Joker leaned back in the chair, rocking slightly. Cold robot hive mind. No individuality. Assimilation. Resistance is futile. He waved dismissively. I skimmed the brochure. Worf growled. They are the most dangerous enemy the Federation has ever faced. Joker looked genuinely fascinated. Really? Because from where I'm sitting, they sound boring. Picard's voice sharpened. You have endangered every life aboard this vessel. Joker's smile widened slowly. Captain, I just invited them to the party. Suddenly the ship shuddered slightly. The bridge alarm sounded through every deck. Data spoke again through the com. Captain, the Borg cube has increased speed. Intercept time now 22 minutes. Picard turned immediately. Riker, with me. The officers began leaving the chamber. But before the doors closed behind them, Joker called out cheerfully. Tell them I said hello. Worf remained behind with 2 security teams. He stepped closer to Joker. You will undo what you have done. Joker leaned forward slowly. You don't get it yet, do you? Worf's eyes narrowed. Exclaimed. Joker smiled wider. You think I'm helping the Borg? He leaned closer. But I'm not. Worf frowned. Then why call them here? Joker's voice dropped to a whisper. Because I want to see what happens when perfect order meets perfect chaos. On the bridge, the atmosphere had turned razor sharp. Picard sat in the captain's chair. Stator stood at operations. The Borg vessel continues accelerating. The massive cube appeared on the viewscreen now, slowly growing larger against the stars. Even across the vast distance of space, it radiated something terrifying. Silence, calculation, inevitability. Riker folded his arms. They're coming straight for us. Worf entered the bridge. Captain, the prisoner remained secured. Picard nodded slightly. Good. He turned back to Data. Have the Borg responded to the broadcast? Data shook his head. No communication attempts have been detected. Worf said quietly. They do not negotiate. Picard knew that better than anyone. Years ago, he had been locuted as a voice for the Borg, a puppet for the Collective, and seeing that cube again brought back memories he wished had stayed buried. Options, Picard said calmly. Riker answered first. We can attempt to outrun them. Data shook his head. Unlikely to succeed. Borg vessels are significantly faster. Worf suggested another. We should prepare to attack. Picard looked at the cube again. That would only delay them. Then, a thought crossed his mind. Mr. Data. Scan the Borg signal frequency. Scanning. Seconds passed. Then Data spoke again. Captain, the Borg vessel is not transmitting standard assimilation protocols. Picard frowned. Exclaimed. Data looked puzzled. It appears the Borg are observing. Riker raised an eyebrow. Observing. Yes, Picard leaned forward slightly. Observing what? Across the ship, deep in the brig, Joker lay comfortably on the bench inside his cell, hands behind his head. Still smiling, he whispered to himself. Come on, metalheads, don't keep me waiting. On the bridge, Data suddenly stiffened. Captain. Yes, Mr. Data. I am detecting a new signal originating from the Borg vessel. The viewscreen flickered. A voice filled the bridge. Cold, mechanical, emotionless. We are the Borg. Every officer froze. The voice continued. Your vessel has transmitted a signal containing patterns inconsistent with known biological or technological systems. Picard spoke carefully. Identify your intention. The Borg answered instantly. We are analyzing the anomaly. The bridge crew exchanged confused looks. Riker whispered, they're studying us. Data shook his head slowly. No. Picard's voice lowered. Then what are they studying? Data looked directly at the sensor display. Then his eyes widened slightly. They are studying the Joker. Back in the brig, Joker suddenly burst out laughing. Because in the endless collective consciousness of the Borg, something new had appeared. A mind they could not categorize. A mind they could not predict. A mind filled with nothing but wild, chaotic madness. And for the first time in their long existence, the Borg were confused. What if the Borg-an intelligence that had analyzed billions of minds across thousands of civilizations had just encountered something they could not process? What if the most organized consciousness in the galaxy had suddenly collided with a mind that had no order at all? Because right now, somewhere inside the cold mechanical awareness of the Borg Collective, millions of drones are attempting to understand the Joker. And the result is something that has never happened before. On the bridge of the Enterprise, the air felt heavier than before. The Borg cube loomed closer now, its massive shape blotting out the stars. But the strangest part wasn't the ship itself. It was what it was doing. Nothing. No weapons. No tractor beams. No attempt to assimilate. Just watching. Picard stood slowly from the captain's chair. Open a channel. Dato hesitated. Captain, Borg vessels do not typically engage in conversation unless initiating assimilation. Nevertheless, Dato nodded. Channel open. Picard stepped forward. This is Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the USS Enterprise. State your intentions. For several seconds, there was silence. Then the mechanical voice returned. We are analyzing an anomaly. Riker frowned. You've already said that. The Borg continued, ignoring him. The biological entity identified as Joker demonstrates unpredictable neurological activity. Picard's eyes narrowed. You are studying him. Correct. Worf's voice rumbled. Why? The Borg answered with eerie calm. His cognitive patterns do not conform to logical biological behavior. Riker muttered under his breath. That's one way of putting it. Picard folded his hands behind his back. Then allow me to clarify something for you. The Borg paused. Picard continued. The individual you are analyzing is extremely dangerous. The Collective responded immediately. All biological distinctiveness adds to our own. Picard's voice hardened. If you attempt to assimilate him, you may discover something you cannot control. For a moment, There was silence. Then the Borg replied, "Resistance is futile." The channel closed. Riker exhaled slowly. Well, that went about as well as expected. Data suddenly turned from his console. "Captain, the Borg cube is deploying a drone vessel." The view screen zoomed in. From one side of the massive cube, a smaller sphere-shaped craft detached and began drifting toward the Enterprise. Worf immediately reacted. Shields up. The ship hummed as defensive barriers activated. "Phasers ready," Worf announced. Picard watched the approaching sphere carefully. "They're sending a boarding drone." Riker looked uneasy. "To capture Joker," Picard nodded slowly. "Exactly. Deep in the brig." Joker sat up as the ship's red alert sirens echoed through the corridors. He grinned. "Took you long enough." Footsteps approached. The cell door opened and Worf entered with 2 security officers. "You will come with us." Joker stood dramatically. "Oh, good. I was getting bored." Worf gestured with his phaser. "Move." Joker stepped out of the cell. As they walked through the corridor, Joker looked around curiously. "You know what's funny about hive minds?" Worf ignored him. Joker continued anyway. "They think everyone wants to belong." He chuckled softly. "But belonging is overrated." The group reached a reinforced containment chamber near the shuttle bay, a room designed for extreme threats. Worf turned to the officers. "Secure him." Joker allowed himself to be placed inside the chamber, without resistance. The doors sealed with a heavy metallic lock. Energy fields activated across the walls. Worf stared through the glass. "You will not escape again." Joker simply smiled. Inside the Enterprise corridors, sparks exploded as Borg cutting beams tore through the hull. Moments later, the wall burst open. Smoke filled the hallway, and through the burning metal stepped 3 Borg drones, silent, precise, unstoppable. Their mechanical eyes scanned the corridors, searching, calculating. Then they began walking, straight toward the containment chamber. Inside the chamber, Joker watched the corridor cameras through the glass display. The drones were coming closer, step by step, emotionless, cold, perfect order. Joker began clapping slowly. "Oh, this is going to be good." The drones reached the door. Their mechanical arms extended. A green cutting beam ignited. The reinforced door melted like butter. Security officers fired phasers. Bright bursts of energy struck the drones. But the Borg adapted instantly. Their shields adjusted. The next shots had no effect. Within seconds, the guards were thrown aside by mechanical strength. The last barrier door opened. The Borg drones entered the containment room. They stopped in front of the glass chamber. Joker stood inside, smiling wider than ever. One of the drones spoke. "Biological anomaly. You will be assimilated." Joker burst into laughter. "Assimilated?" He stepped closer to the glass. "You really think you can handle that?" The chamber doors opened automatically. The drones stepped forward. Mechanical tubules extended from their arms, reaching toward Joker's neck. The collective spoke again. "You will become part of the Borg." Joker tilted his head. "Let me ask you something first." The drones paused for a fraction of a second. "What?" Joker's grin stretched wider than ever. "What happens when chaos joins the hive?" And somewhere deep inside the endless consciousness of the Borg Collective, the first injection of Joker's mind began. And within seconds, something impossible started happening. Across the Borg cube, thousands of drones suddenly stopped moving. What if the Borg had just made the worst mistake in their entire existence? What if the most disciplined, perfectly unified intelligence in the galaxy had just plugged itself directly into the mind of a man whose thoughts were nothing but chaos? Because at this very moment, inside the endless network of the Borg Collective, something is spreading. Something they cannot categorize, cannot predict, and cannot stop. And its name is laughter. The moment the assimilation tubules pierced Joker's neck, the Borg expected the usual result. Information, memories, skills, all biological life forms, no matter how unique, eventually dissolved into the quiet logic of the collective. But Joker wasn't dissolving. The drone stood motionless in front of him as the assimilation process began. Nanoprobes flowed into his bloodstream, his nervous system connected to the collective. For a brief moment, silence. Then Joker started giggling. At first it was quiet, just a soft chuckle under his breath. But then it grew louder and louder, until he was laughing uncontrollably. One of the Borg drones spoke in its usual monotone voice. Motivation, undefined. Behavioral logic, contradictory. Decision patterns, random. Inside the containment chamber, Joker leaned forward as the tubules remained connected. "You guys are awfully quiet," he whispered. The drone's voice spoke again. Cognitive instability detected. Joker's laughter erupted again. "Oh, you think?" On the Borg cube, thousands of drones suddenly froze in place. Processing cycles began repeating. Individual drones turned toward each other as if confused. Inside the collective, something unprecedented was happening. The perfect unity of thought was beginning to fracture. A thought appeared in the network. Not logical, not purposeful. Just a single impulse. Why not? Then another. What if? Then another. Wouldn't that be funny? These thoughts spread like a virus. The Borg tried to isolate the anomaly, but Joker's mind didn't follow patterns. It didn't move logically. It jumped. It twisted. It contradicted itself constantly, which meant the collective couldn't predict where the next disruption would appear. Back on the Enterprise bridge, Data suddenly looked up from his console. Some stood completely still. Others began performing tasks unrelated to their assigned functions. One drone in a corridor suddenly turned in circles. Another began repeatedly attempting to open and close the same panel. Inside the collective consciousness, millions of voices spoke in perfect unison, but now, those voices were beginning to overlap, contradict, argue. A concept the Borg had never experienced before began to appear. Individual thought. Back in the containment chamber, Joker finally pulled the assimilation tubules from his neck. The drones in front of him didn't react. They simply stood there, frozen, processing. Joker rubbed his neck. Ouch. He stepped around them casually. "Don't worry," he said cheerfully. "You'll get used to it." Suddenly the drone nearest him twitched. Its head turned toward Joker slowly. Then it spoke again. But this time, the voice wasn't fully Borg. "We are confused." Joker grinned. "Welcome to the club." On the bridge of the Enterprise, alarms suddenly stopped. Data blinked in surprise. "Captain, the Borg sphere is disengaged from the hull." The view screen showed the small vessel pulling away from the Enterprise. Riker stared. "They're retreating." Picard stood slowly. "Impossible." Data analyzed the cube again. "Captain, the entire Borg vessel is experiencing widespread neural disruption." Worf crossed his arms. "You mean they're malfunctioning?" Data considered the word. "Yes." Inside the Borg cube, drones began walking aimlessly through corridors. Some began laughing, not mechanical imitation, actual laughter. A terrifying sound echoing through the metal halls of the most feared species in the galaxy. The collective attempted to restore order, but Joker's mind was already everywhere.